Welcome back to another edition of Components Breakdown. Today we're going to be looking at the 2010 Essen release game called Grand Cru. Grand Cru is a 2 to 5 player auction bidding style game that takes about 90 minutes to complete. Now the game revolves around the wine industry, in which each of the players is going to have to take out a substantial loan from the bank in order to start up their wine company. Throughout the course of the game, they will be buying or procuring grapevines in a variety of different kinds, such as Gameys and Merlots. And they'll be cultivating these and eventually throwing them down into barrels and letting them age through the course of the game in order to recoup the funds. And at the end of the game, each player will have to pay off, or one of the players will have to pay off the bank in order to get to the end-game conditions. It's a very unique style game. It's got a really great theme. So let's go ahead and open up the box and take a look inside. We'll briefly go through the components, then get right into the gameplay. The game ships in a nice wooden box. This is the limited edition of the game. Looking at the game board, there's several different regions. The upper left-hand corner is the auction board. You'll be using as many spaces on here as there are players, so this two-player game that I set up is only going to use the first 2 rows. You'll be bidding on 2 different kinds of tiles through the course. There's improvement tiles, which allow you to take special abilities, and then there are grapevine tiles. The grapevines are broken into 5 different kinds of wines. There's a Sauvignon, a Syrah, a Pinot, a Gamay, and a Merlot, and they each have their own individual cubes which represent those particular wines. There is a year track, which is going to have 4 different seasons in each year. You'll be playing about 6 to 10 different years. There is a demand track, which will go up and down and fluctuate as the game progresses. Each one of these represents a different kind of wine. Again, they're all color coordinated. There is the wine festival track, in which you'll be earning prestige points and being able to use them to earn special abilities from one year to the next. Each individual player will have their own individual barrel, in which they will sell goods and place them into this barrel to earn prestige points during the wine festival. And then there is a loan track, which has 2 different numbers on it. The top number is how many loans you have taken out. Each loan is worth 7 francs. And the bottom is the amount of interest that you'll be paying for that particular loan at the end of each year. There are player boards for each player. They're represented by their shields, which again match the barrels on the board. There are 12 spaces in each of them, which you'll be placing your improvements and your wines. There are 5 markers, which will be used at the start of the game to determine how many loans you take out, as well as placements for particular areas you'll be using on the board. And then there's one of these markers, which represents the loan value. On the bottom is your barrels. This is where you'll be harvesting your wine to. You always place it in the left one, and eventually the wine will start to age, so it takes longer for some of the more expensive wines to age. There is a first player marker, which is this little red jug, and then of course there are francs, which are paper money. They're single-sided. Very flimsy though, not the best quality in the world. So those are the components. Let's go ahead and set up a 2-player game. A typical game of Grand Cru is going to last anywhere between 6 to 10 years, and now that can vary quite drastically depending upon the group of players that are participating. If you have a group, like my wife for instance, who likes to hoard a lot of things and buy a lot of things, the game can actually be prolonged for maybe a year or 2. And if you have a group that's very aggressive and likes to manage everything and are very economically savvy down to the last franc, you can have a game that can actually be a little bit shorter than that in the number of years that are played. The end of the game is triggered in a very unique way. Once the first person pays off all of their loans and has no loans available, the game will be triggered. At the start of the game, each of the players will have to take out loans, though, in order to start up their business. There's simply no way around it. To do that, each player will take their 5 markers and put them in their hand and lay them down at simultaneously however many loans they wish to take, 1 through 5. I've already simulated that here and shown that the white player took out 3 loans and the blue player took out 5. So he got 21 francs and he got 35 francs. The person that bid the highest gets to be the first player and gets this red jug that you see right there. They will be the first player for the entirety of the game unless someone through the course of the wine festival overtakes their position here and becomes the first player. A typical turn is going to look something like this. The first player gets to take 1 action on each season. At the start of the game, the first player always moves this marker to the next season. During his actions, he's allowed 9 different things to do. One of them I'll get right out of the way, and that's simply passing, doing nothing at all. The second action he can take is auctioning a tile, taking one of these tiles that start off the game and placing it down here in one of these bidding tracks and placing one of his markers on how much he wishes to bid. If he wishes to bid 7, he can get it right away, or if he wishes to bid 1, it will go through an auctioning system. Once his action is over, it will go to the next player. The next player is allowed a different action, or the same action if he so wishes. He can raise that bid up with one of his own markers, he can buy the tile immediately, or he can bring something down himself to be auctioned off and placing his marker there. Very simple. Once both players have done their action, it comes back around to the first player and he will keep moving that. Very simple to understand. Now, a player, on their turn, if this thing they have bid on is still the highest one in that row, for instance, he's already done something and it's a 2-player game, coming back around to the blue player's turn, he's the highest bidder. He can pay 1 franc now to get this. If he so wishes to get this, he takes the wine along with one of these markers and places it on his board, signifying that he has planted that grapevine. Very simple. Another action a player can take is raising the demand for one of the grapevines by 1 level. Over here is a demand track showing you how much a specific wine sells for. Knowing that he's planted a yellow, he may wish to spend one of his turns simply raising the value of this up by 1. Now they go up, some of them, like the cap for the Gamay is 3 francs, and the cap for the Pinots is 9 francs. Again, very easy to understand. A player can spend 1 franc to harvest something that he has on his board. So the blue player here could spend one of his actions to simply harvest this and put it down into the very first barrel. Every time that you harvest something, it goes down into the first barrel of your cellar. Again, very easy to understand. A player on his turn can decide as an action to sell something. Selling it, you have to be able to, now this is very easy to understand as well. Gamays right here are in the first 3 barrels. They're pretty much ripe and ready to sell as soon as you harvest them. However, Pinots that you see here have various different stages they have to go through before they become accessible and have aged enough in order to sell. At the end of every turn, everything in your barrels, no matter where they are going to move 1 stage to the right. So you can't actually sell this Syrah until it is into one of these markers that matches the yellow that you see there. Say for instance, on his turn, this was in this barrel. He could sell this. He looks at the sell value of yellow, which is 3, and he places it in his particular barrel. So he is the blue player. He looks over here, sells it, gets 3 francs, and places it into that barrel, signifying that that is his during the wine festival. Very easy to understand. Again, the last action you can take in your turn, if you have bought an improvement through the auction board, improvements will always go onto your board. You can simply flip it over and use whatever that improvement is. These will always flip back over at the end of the turn. Once everybody has done their actions from season to season, finally when you get to the 4th season, usually the year will be over. Now this is where the really vague part of the game comes into play. The end of the year cannot be triggered unless one player has cultivated everything off their board or harvested everything off their board. So once you have a lot of different grapevines out here, people are going to have cubes all over these depending upon what stage they've actually brought them down and harvested. So the round will keep going around and around and around more than actually 4 actions until the last person has done that, or until everybody but one player has passed and not done anything. So as you can see, a year is not actually going to be 4 actions. It's going to be several actions until someone has harvested the last grape off of their cultivation board. At the end of the year, some things will take place. New tiles will come out depending upon the number of players. So if it is a 2-player game, it's twice that number. You just simply pick in there, move all the old ones that didn't get used, and bring 4 new ones in. The next thing that's going to occur is the wine festival, and every player that's participating is going to start with one of their markers in this orange area. People are going to be getting prestige points depending upon if you had the most of one particular color and if you had the second most, 3 and 1 as you see there on the barrels. So you go through each of these different wines in any order that you so wish. Whoever has the most green is going to get 3. So the white player has the most and he goes up 3 on this prestige track. Whoever has the most yellow goes up 3, and that is the blue player. So again, he goes up. Whoever has the second most yellows, right there, so white's going to get 1. And you'll keep doing this for every player participating, looking at each of the wines in individual order. Once that is done, whoever is leading on the prestige track gets to take one of these actions down here, using one of his markers to signify that that has been used up. Each of these can only be used once during each of the years. You simply decide which one you want to use, such as, say for instance, he wants to spend one of his prestige to move up the demand track on any one of these different kinds of wines. He simply takes one of his markers, so the blue player, or the white player would be going first, places one of his markers there, and he moves back one. And each player will be going in turn order all the way around the board until they decide not to spend any prestige points, or they've used them and gone down to 0. Or if there's nothing else that they can buy down here. Again, only one player is allowed to occupy one of these spaces during each year. Once that is done, each player is going to mature their wine. They simply look in their cellar, and everything that is in any of these barrels is going to move to the right. So each player will move their stuff to the right, meaning that the wine they're trying to sell eventually is maturing inside the cellar. Then each player is going to pay back the interest to their loans. So the blue player will have to pay back 7 francs, and the white player will have to pay back 5. If, however, they cannot pay them back, they have to move down 1 and take out a loan for 5 more francs, not 7 that you see here. So it gets expensive if you aren't able to pay back your interest. The last thing that's going to happen is each player can pay back a loan after they paid back the interest. It costs $7 for each loan that you wish to pay back. If the white player wishes to pay 7 francs, he simply moves it over, meaning that his interest on the next turn is going to be lower, and he's a little bit closer to ending the game for each individual player. Once that is done, you'll keep going through several different years until one player has eventually paid off all of their loans. The end of the game is, again, a little bit unique. You're going to add up all the money that you've collected through the course of the game minus any loans that you have. So this player, if the game would end, would still owe $35 for loans. So you take off 35 points. Each player is going to get 1 point for every single grape they have in their barrels that they have not sold. So that's 1 franc for each one of these. And they're going to get 5 francs for each unique tile that they have. So if they have all 5 different wines that you see up here, they're going to get 25 points. For every different improvement tile, they're going to get another 5 points. The person with the most francs is going to win. Very easy game to understand. It's a very easy game to explain to newcomers. Take what I have to say here with a grain of salt, because I've only played the game 4 times now. It's a very simple game to teach and a very simple game to learn. There's some nice strategies that can be used, either going short term with like Gamay or going long term with Pinots. There's also some good strategy on here in trying to end the season or end the year early by cultivating as much stuff as you can and harvesting it prior to your opponents, so you can really kind of shortcome their income and make them pay a lot more on their interest when the end of the year comes out if they have not had a chance to sell their own wines. So there's some good strategy in here. However, the game really falls flat with a 2-player experience. There's just not enough actions, there's too much screwage. I understand that's a really good thing for multiplayer, but in a 2-player game it just didn't feel right. It felt like there were too many mechanics going on at once, and there was not enough time in a year to really get anything done. In a 4-player game though, it really works well. The components are wonderfully done. This theme really comes through in everything that they produce for the game. This is a theme that's really not done enough in this industry. I like the game. I would definitely suggest it and give everybody a chance to play it at least once. However, I would not suggest it as a 2-player game. If you want to play it, get 3 or more players and try that experience. I think you guys will like it. That is Grand Cru, and thank you very much for watching.